The first alert came as a flicker across the enemy's command screens. At first, the officers thought it was some sort of sensor glitch, the kind that happens when too many ships drift too close together in formation. But the flicker returned, stronger, sharper, and unmistakable. A single reading pulsed on the edge of their scanners, an echo that did not match any vessel in their vast armada. They ran the scans again, and this time there was no mistake. A warship. Human. For a moment, silence fell over the bridge of the flagship. These were seasoned warriors, veterans of countless campaigns, trained never to show fear. Yet the moment the word human left the lips of the chief analyst, the silence cracked into nervous whispers. Panic rippled like a wave through the corridors. To outsiders, it might seem strange. One lone ship against an armada that blotted out the stars. But to them, it was no laughing matter. They had all heard the stories. Human warships were not ordinary vessels. They were nightmares forged in steel, shadows that moved faster than any eye could follow, predators designed to tear apart fleets far larger than themselves. No one on the enemy bridge said it aloud, but every single one of them thought the same thing. We are being hunted. Out in the black void, the ship remained unseen by the naked eye, hidden behind its layers of stealth and silence. The sensors only caught fragments, the faintest shiver of its presence, like a predator deliberately letting the prey know it was there. Some believed humans did this on purpose. They could have remained invisible forever, but instead, they allowed their enemies to catch a glimpse, just enough to plant fear, to unravel discipline, to make them hesitate, because hesitation, in battle, was death. The commander of the alien fleet tightened his grip on the command chair. His armada stretched across a dozen systems, a force so mighty that it had crushed resistance wherever it went. And yet now, in the stillness of space, his chest felt heavy. He remembered the last. Reports, the ones whispered in private channels. Fleets cut to pieces by single human warships. Entire campaigns ended before they began. Some had called those reports exaggerations. Some had called them myths, but myths did not leave wreckage drifting in the void. Deep in the heart of the hidden ship, humans watched in silence. The crew did not celebrate the panic they caused. They did not need to. Every man and woman on board knew the weight of their mission. They were outnumbered beyond reason, but numbers had never frightened them. Human ships were not designed to match enemy firepower ship for ship. They were designed to outthink, outmaneuver, and strike where it mattered most. And above all, they were designed to show the galaxy that humanity was not to be underestimated. One of the younger crew members leaned over the console, her voice low but steady. "They've seen us." The words carried no fear, only certainty. The captain, an older figure with battle lines etched across his face, gave a single nod. "Good," he said. "Let them wonder where we are. Let them wonder what we're planning, the key." Crew moved with precision, hands gliding across glowing controls, eyes fixed on streams of data. There was no shouting, no chaos. Only calm, practiced efficiency. Every heartbeat brought them closer to the moment they would strike. On the enemy flagship, the command staff argued in hurried voices. Some wanted to scatter the fleet, to make it harder for the human ship to pick them apart. Others demanded they close ranks, believing numbers would shield them. The commander gave no order, torn between fear of exposing weakness and fear of making the wrong move. Every second of hesitation was another second the humans used to their advantage. The tension grew thick, like static before a storm. Somewhere, a junior officer whispered, "What if there's more than one?" The thought spread like poison. If one human warship could devastate a fleet, what could two do? Or three? The imagination filled in the silence with horrors far worse than reality. Meanwhile, in the shadows of an asteroid field, the human ship shifted. Engines hummed softly, almost imperceptible, as the vessel changed course. It had already chosen its first target. The question was not if it would strike, but when. The galaxy knew humans differently than they knew themselves. To their enemies, humanity was reckless, unpredictable, and terrifyingly resourceful. The stories said that even when outgunned, humans found ways to win by turning debris into weapons, by sacrificing comfort for speed, by pushing themselves further than anyone else dared. No other species had their stubborn refusal to surrender, their refusal to bow to overwhelming odds. Inside the Armada, fear turned to near panic. Ships began to shift position without orders, captains breaking formation in desperate attempts to shield themselves. Every sensor ping, every unexplained flicker of light felt like a death sentence. The commander shouted to restore order, but even he could not ignore the tightening knot in his stomach. Somewhere in the black, a human warship was watching them. Back, on the hidden vessel, the captain studied the display. The enemy was unraveling faster than expected. A small smile touched his lips, not of joy, but of grim understanding. "Fear does half the work for us," he murmured. Around him, the crew remained silent, their eyes locked forward. They knew what was coming. Then the sensors lit up. The human ship had locked onto a target. The first strike would not be to destroy, it would be to remind the galaxy that humanity was not prey, not weak, not to be dismissed. The crew braced, waiting for the captain's command. In the alien armada, the tension reached breaking point. Some ships powered their weapons. Others raised shields. None of them knew where the strike would land. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. And then, silence. The human ship did not fire. Not yet. It waited, patient, letting the fear grow until it was unbearable. Every second of silence felt like an eternity. Every flicker of the sensors a knife twisting deeper. The enemy armada, vast and mighty, now felt smaller, fragile, and exposed. In that silence, the captain of the human ship spoke quietly to his crew. Let them feel it. Let them understand. The galaxy had learned to fear human warships. And now one of those warships was here, watching, waiting, ready to remind them why. The commander of the alien fleet stood frozen, staring at the display as if it held his doom. He did not know when or how the strike would come, only that it would, and as the stars stretched out in endless silence, the question hung heavy in every mind. When the humans finally chose to reveal themselves, would there be anything left? Of the Armada at all? The silence stretched on, pressing down on every mind aboard the alien flagship. What had begun as murmurs of fear had now grown into a steady pulse of dread. Every officer could feel it, though none dared speak it aloud. The human ship was still out there, hidden in the void, and it had not yet struck. That silence was worse than any barrage of firepower. It gnawed at their nerves, made them second-guess their own scanners, and turned their imagination into an enemy even more dangerous than the humans themselves. Far from their eyes, tucked, deep in the shadow of drifting stone and ice, the human warship lay quiet. The crew worked methodically, every movement controlled, every breath measured. They did not waste words because none were needed. Each officer knew their task, each technician knew their role, and each pilot knew their path. These were not ordinary men and women. They had been trained for missions like this, sharpened by years of preparation. But even so, there was a weight that pressed upon them. They were not facing a single enemy cruiser or a small patrol. They were facing an armada, vast enough to overwhelm worlds, yet that knowledge did not fill them with despair. Instead, it brought a quiet resolve. For humanity, fear was not something to run from. It was something to master, to mold into fuel. Every soldier on board understood why they were here. They were not just protecting Earth or the colonies or even their own families. They were here to show that humans could not be erased, no matter how many fleets rose against them. A young officer glanced at her display and whispered, "They're scattering." The captain moved closer, watching the swarm of enemy ships, shifting without cohesion. It was exactly what he expected. Panic broke discipline faster than any weapon. A vast armada had power, but power without unity was nothing more than a target waiting to be split apart. The captain did not smile this time. His eyes stayed cold. "They're afraid of shadows," he said, his voice low. "Good. Let them be afraid." On the other side, the alien commander wrestled with doubt. He had been trained to face countless scenarios, drilled in the art of commanding fleets that stretched across entire star systems. But nothing in his training had prepared him for this. One warship should have been nothing. One warship should not have been able to threaten an armada. And yet here he stood, staring at the display as if it marked his death sentence. His officers begged for orders, their voices tight, their words clashing. Scatter, regroup, advance, retreat. Every suggestion contradicted the last, and every moment of indecision only deepened the cracks in their confidence. The commander closed, his eyes for a heartbeat, and thought of the last battle he had fought. It had been against another empire, one with ships and weapons that rivaled his own. He remembered the thunder of cannons, the blaze of engines, the roar of victory. That had been war as he understood it. Numbers, firepower, and attrition. But this? This was something else entirely. This was the enemy breaking his fleet without firing a shot. Meanwhile, inside the human vessel, the crew continued to monitor the shifting formation. Each flicker of movement was recorded, each opening marked, each mistake catalogued. Humans had always been hunters, even before they sailed among the stars. From the ancient fields where spears brought down prey to the deep seas, where patience meant survival, humanity had learned long ago that victory did not always come from strength. Sometimes it came from waiting. Sometimes it came from striking at the moment when the prey's fear outweighed its will to fight. One crewman leaned back from his console, his voice almost thoughtful. "They don't know where we are, but they know we're here. That's enough." His words carried no arrogance, only recognition of truth. Another officer adjusted the targeting matrix, her hands steady despite the tension. She knew the order had not yet come, but when it did, she would be ready. Still, for all their training, the humans were not without doubt. Each of them carried memories of battles past, memories of comrades who had not returned. Each of them understood the cost of facing an enemy this large, and yet not one asked to turn away. Not one suggested retreat, because deep within them lay the same conviction. If they failed here, the galaxy would see humans as weak again. That was something no one aboard could allow. Back in the Armada, rumors began to ripple between ships. The humans had cloaking technology. No one else understood. The humans could tear through shields as if they were paper. The humans could fight for days without rest. Some whispered even darker tales, that human ships were guided not just by their crews, but by some relentless intelligence that never slept, never faltered. Myths spread faster than truth, and fear spread faster still. The commander tried to stamp down the whispers, but they slipped through the channels, bouncing from one ship to another until discipline frayed like a worn rope. He could feel it slipping from his grasp. This was how battles were lost before they even began. Not with fire, but with fear. Inside the human vessel, the captain stood in the dim light, studying the star field. He remembered his own stories. The ones told long ago when humanity was first exploring the void. Every species they had encountered had underestimated them at first. Everyone had looked at humans and seen fragile creatures, too young, too reckless, too few in number, and every time humanity had proved them wrong. They had clawed their way across the stars, not because of superior strength, but because they refused to accept defeat. That same fire now burned in the captain's chest, steady and fierce. The younger crew members felt it too. Though they did not speak it, they carried pride beneath their fear. Pride that they were part of something greater than themselves. Pride that when history remembered this night, it would not be the Armada's power that mattered, but the courage of one ship, standing against impossible odds. The alien commander gave the order to tighten defenses, but even as he spoke, he knew it was hollow. Every movement his fleet made seemed to play into the humans' hands. He tried to convince himself that numbers would prevail, that overwhelming force would crush one ship no matter how cunning it was. But deep inside, he knew the truth. Numbers could not kill a shadow, and fear could not be erased by orders. Time stretched like a wire pulled taut, ready to snap. The human ship remained hidden, watching, waiting, letting the Armada drown in its own fear. Every passing second made the silence heavier. Every passing second fed the legend of human warships, turning them into phantoms in the minds of their enemies. And still, the humans did not fire. The enemy fleet twisted in uncertainty, each ship unsure if the next breath would bring their destruction. The commander gripped the arm of his chair, sweat beading on his skin though the air was cold. The captain of the human ship stood calm, eyes steady, waiting for the perfect moment. It had become more than a battle. It was a test of wills, and in that endless silence, every heart aboard the alien Armada knew one truth. If the humans chose to strike, it would already be too late to stop them. The alien Armada drifted like a wounded beast, restless and uneasy. The commander had given the order to regroup, but no one truly believed in the strength of that formation. Dozens of ships shifted closer together, overlapping fields of fire, shields humming with nervous energy. Yet every pilot, every officer, every soldier felt the weight of unseen eyes pressing down on them. Somewhere out there, beyond the edge of sight, the human warship waited. Inside the alien flagship, the tension was raw. Officers clutched at their consoles, glancing at their commander, waiting for something, anything that resembled certainty. But the commander had none to give. He stared at the endless dark on the screen, knowing full well that darkness was not empty. He had seen the reports. One ship, small compared to their massive cruisers, had slipped into enemy territory and left only wreckage behind. Entire fleets had been scattered, not by brute force, but by something far worse: precision. The humans did not fight like others. They didn't march in predictable lines or overwhelm with sheer size. They chose where to strike, when to vanish, when to let fear break an opponent before weapons ever fired. And now, that strategy was working again. His vast armada, strong enough to flatten a system, was paralyzed by a ship they could barely detect. On the human warship, the crew sat in dim light, each face lit by the glow of displays. They were patient, but patience did not mean calm. Everyone could feel the air thick with anticipation. One slip, one mistake, and they would be overwhelmed. But fear did not drive them apart. It bound them tighter. Humans had always been like this. When danger grew, they grew closer. When odds tilted against them, they grew sharper. The crew moved like one body, each member trusting the others without question. A young technician studied the shifting data on her screen. "They're clustering too tightly," she whispered. "If they keep drawing in, they'll blind their own sensors." The captain's eyes narrowed. "Exactly what we want." His voice was steady, but inside he felt the weight of the mission. Press harder. He knew his crew looked to him as a rock, and so he gave them nothing but certainty. But he also knew the truth. This was more than a battle. This was a message. Humanity had been dismissed for too long, brushed aside as reckless. Newcomers. Every move he made here would echo across the stars. Elsewhere in the ship, in the narrow corridors lined with pipes and glowing cables, the lower crew spoke in hushed tones. They were engineers, loaders, medics, not warriors in the traditional sense. Yet every one of them understood the danger. One engineer leaned against the wall, whispering to another, "You ever think about what happens if we don't come back?" The other didn't flinch. "If we don't come back, they'll know we didn't go quietly. That's enough." These quiet moments revealed something deeper about the humans. For them, survival was never guaranteed. What mattered was how they faced the impossible. And here, in the silence of space, they faced it with steady resolve. Back on the enemy flagship, cracks widened. A junior officer dared to speak up. "We should strike first," he said, his voice trembling but desperate. "If we fire across the field, we might catch them before they move." Another officer snapped back. "Or we waste firepower and reveal every weakness we have." Their voices rose, clashing, while the commander sat unmoving, knowing both were right and both were wrong. To fire blindly was to waste strength. To sit idle was to invite disaster. He remembered the legends told by other fleets, how humans didn't just fight with weapons, but with patience. How they let enemies destroy themselves long before the first missile was ever launched. The commander clenched his fist, fighting the creeping thought that his armada was already halfway to ruin. Meanwhile, the human warship shifted its course again, sliding deeper into the shadows. They were hunters, and like any hunter, they knew the value of movement unseen. The captain paced behind his crew, his boots whispering against the deck. "Let them think they control the field," he said quietly. "Let them think their numbers protect them. The more they convince themselves, the harder the fall will be." The crew responded with silence, but not from fear. It was focus. Every hand stayed busy, every mind locked on their task. They didn't need speeches. Their purpose was already carved deep within them. Yet not everyone aboard found peace in silence. In the small mess hall, where only a few dared to gather, two younger crew members spoke in hushed tones over cold meals. "Do you think they know how close we are?" one asked. The other shook his head. "They're too afraid to know. That's the difference between them and us." He tapped the table softly. "Fear makes them weak. Fear makes us sharper." But even as he said it, doubt crept at the edges of his voice. Because fear did not vanish, even among humans. It lingered, twisting in the stomach, whispering what-ifs. The strength of the crew lay not in being without fear, but in carrying it together. Back. In the armada, smaller ships began drifting out of position. Captains who could not stomach the silence broke orders, shifting their cruisers slightly away from the pack, believing distance might keep them safe. The commander saw it at once, rage burning in his chest, but he knew he could not stop it. Discipline had begun to crumble. One ship breaking ranks led to another, and soon the once mighty formation rippled with disorder. The human crew watched it happen on their displays, every ship out of place lighting up like an opportunity. The captain's voice was soft but firm. "They're unraveling. That's when they're most dangerous. A desperate enemy will do anything." For the aliens, desperation began to take root. They whispered of ghosts. They whispered that the humans had been in their systems long before this battle, that spies had slipped among their people, that the ship before them was not the only one. Fear twisted into paranoia, and paranoia spread faster than orders. The commander tried to seize control, calling for calm, demanding unity. But even as he barked the words, he felt the cold truth settle in his bones. Unity was gone. His fleet was still vast, still armed, still capable of destruction, but its spirit had cracked. And war was as much about spirit as it was about weapons. The human captain stood still, eyes on the void. He could sense the moment approaching, though he did not rush it. To strike too soon was to waste the fear that now gripped the enemy. To wait too long was to risk losing the element of control. It was a knife's edge, and he walked it without hesitation. In the dark corridors of the human ship, engines hummed, ready to burst into motion. Weapons sat armed but silent, waiting for the command. The crew waited too, hearts steady but pounding, knowing that when the first order came, the quiet would shatter into fire and chaos. The alien commander gripped his chair, feeling the tremor of unease ripple through every ship under his command. He knew the humans were watching. He knew they would strike when he least expected. What he did not know, what he could not know, was whether his armada would still stand once that strike fell. And in the silence, the stars themselves seemed to lean closer, waiting for the inevitable clash. The galaxy held its breath, caught, between the fear of the unknown and the certainty that something unstoppable was about to unfold. The alien armada stretched across the void like a wall of steel, but the cracks inside it were widening with every passing minute. The once perfect formation was now littered with small gaps, captains drifting out of position in fear of what they could not see. Every flicker on their sensors made them flinch. Every static pulse on their screens sent nervous voices over the comm channels. The commander barked orders, his voice sharp, but even he could feel control slipping. It wasn't the humans' weapons that had weakened them. It was the waiting. It was the silence. It was the knowledge that somewhere, hidden and patient, a human warship was watching. Inside that warship, the crew was still calm, though the air was tight with tension. Every officer felt the shift in the enemy formation. Every technician logged, the mistakes building up like cracks in glass. The captain stood behind his crew, eyes locked on the tactical display. His voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but it carried through the room. They're breaking themselves apart. We don't need to force it. Let them keep unraveling. His crew nodded without hesitation. They trusted his patience, even as their own hands itched to strike. But patience was not easy to hold. One young crew member stared at the blinking lights on her console, her heart pounding. The enemy fleet was massive, their weapons beyond count, and yet here they were, holding the line with silence alone. She thought of her family, light years away, unaware of the danger she now faced. She thought of Earth, still rebuilding, still vulnerable. And she thought of the stories told to every recruit, that a single human warship could shake an empire if it struck at the right time. Now she was living that story, and the weight of it pressed down on her chest. On the alien flagship, the commander paced like a caged predator. His officers argued louder, their fear breaking into open conflict. "We should strike," one shouted. "We cannot let them choose the moment." Another countered, "If we waste firepower, we expose our flanks. That is what they want." Their voices rose until the commander slammed his fist against the arm of his chair. Silence followed, but it was brittle silence. Fear still moved beneath it, restless and uncontained. He knew the truth of what they faced. It wasn't just one warship. It was the legend of humanity itself, the reputation carved into the minds of every species that had fought them. Humans fought differently. They did not surrender. They did not retreat when cornered. They found ways to turn weakness into strength, and they struck where no one expected. He had told himself that legends were only stories. But now, standing at the heart of his trembling armada, he was not so sure. The human warship moved again, gliding along the edge of the asteroid field, its engines whisper quiet. The crew made the shift with precision, every adjustment measured to keep them hidden. On the screens, the enemy armada loomed like a storm on the horizon. The captain studied it carefully, his eyes catching every weak point. He could see which ships were drifting, which captains had lost nerve, which sections of the formation would collapse first. He said nothing yet. Words were not needed. His crew knew that when the moment came, it would come all at once. Far below deck, the engineers tended to the heart of the ship. The reactors pulsed with steady power, the engines ready to burst into sudden motion. They spoke little, but in their silence lay a quiet pride. They knew the others relied on them. If the ship faltered at the wrong moment, if the engines failed, or the weapons misfired, all would be lost. They carried that weight without complaint. Humanity had always been carried forward by those whose work was unseen. Above them, in the cramped medbay, the ship's doctor sorted supplies. She hoped they wouldn't be needed, but she knew better than to believe it. Battle was coming. There would be wounds, maybe worse. Her hands moved with practiced speed, laying out kits and tools. She had treated soldiers before, had seen what enemy fire did to human flesh, and she carried those memories like scars of her own. But she also knew something else. Humans had a way of surviving wounds that should have killed them. They had a way of rising again when no one expected it. That stubborn spark was what kept her steady. On the enemy side, paranoia deepened. Whispers spread that the human ship had already infiltrated their lines, that saboteurs were among them. Small skirmishes broke out between nervous crews, mistakes born of fear. The commander tried to suppress the chaos, but every order seemed to make things worse. His vast armada was beginning to feel less like a weapon and more like prey circling itself. Then it came. The first flash. Not an attack, not yet. Just a ripple on the sensors, sharp and sudden, like lightning on the horizon. The alien fleet froze, weapons charging, shields rising, every ship bracing for the blow, but the strike never came. The flash was gone as quickly as it appeared, leaving only silence in its wake. It was nothing more than a ghost signal, a flicker of the human ship's shadow, but it was enough. The alien crews broke into shouts, panicked voices filling the channels. Some ships fired blindly into the dark, beams of energy lighting up empty space. Others pulled further from formation, afraid to be the first target. The commander shouted for discipline, but even he could not calm the storm he now faced. The humans hadn't fired a single shot, and yet the armada was already bleeding strength. Inside the human vessel, the captain watched the chaos unfold. His crew remained still, their discipline unshaken. The captain gave the faintest nod. "They're showing us everything we need to know," he said. His words were calm, but the tension in the room grew heavier. Every heartbeat brought them closer to the moment when silence would end. The young technician glanced up from her console, her voice barely above a whisper. "How long do we wait?" The captain's eyes stayed on the screen. "Until they can't take the waiting anymore." And so they waited, and the enemy fleet tore itself apart one breath at a time. But the pressure on the human crew was no less real. They could feel the weight of the armada's size pressing down on them, the knowledge that one mistake would end everything. The captain carried it quietly, but his crew saw the lines deepening on his face, the shadows under his eyes. He was human like them, flawed, tired, but unbreakable. And because of that, they trusted him even more. The alien commander gripped the arms of his chair so tightly, his claws left grooves in the metal. He could feel the breaking point coming. His fleet could not hold like this much longer. The human ship would strike, and when it did, the galaxy would know which side survived. His chest tightened. And though he did not speak it aloud, the thought twisted in his mind like a knife. What if we don't survive at all? The silence thickened, broken only by nervous voices, only by the hum of weapons primed for a battle that had not yet begun. The void itself seemed to hold its breath. Every star burned like an unblinking eye, watching, waiting for the moment when history would ignite. And then the human captain gave the quietest of commands. Not an attack order, not yet. Just a single word to his crew. Ready? Every console lit brighter. Every hand moved faster. Every heart tightened in anticipation. The moment was close. The hunt had stretched long. The silence had been drawn to its breaking point. And now the knife's edge trembled with tension. In the alien fleet, panic reached its peak. Weapons bristled, engines roared, voices screamed across the channels. They could feel it. The humans were about to move. No one knew when or how, but every ship knew it was coming. And in the endless dark of space, with silence stretched tighter than steel, the next breath could be the one that shattered everything. The void was poised on the edge of violence. The human captain's single word, "ready," hung in the air like a blade about to fall. His crew's eyes gleamed with the reflections of their consoles, hands steady, waiting for the next command. On the alien side, the armada was a storm of panic, weapons bristling, engines flaring, discipline unraveling into chaos. Every ship believed the strike was moments away. And yet, the human warship remained still, a predator holding back, savoring the fear. But then, something happened. No one expected. A second ripple lit across the human sensors, sharp and alien, not from their own ship, but from the far side of the battlefield. The crew turned, eyes narrowing as new readings poured in. Another presence, another signature. Not one of the panicked fleet, but something hidden, watching from a different angle. The captain's jaw tightened as he studied the display. "We're not the only hunters here." The crew fell into tense silence. For weeks, their mission had focused on this armada, this vast threat pressing against human space. They had prepared to face overwhelming numbers, to use fear and precision as their weapons. But now, another ship, or perhaps more than one, had entered the game. And unlike the panicked fleet, this new presence was calm, quiet, deliberate. It was not caught in fear. It was waiting, like them. On the enemy flagship, the commander hadn't noticed yet. His focus was still on the human vessel he could not see, still on the fear tearing through his own fleet. But the humans saw it. The hidden ship's pattern was too precise to be random interference. It wasn't panicked, wasn't scattered. It was steady, methodical, and positioned perfectly to watch the entire armada collapse. The captain's eyes narrowed. Someone else is here for the kill. This revelation sent a quiet chill through the crew. Their mission had been dangerous. Enough. But at least the battlefield had been clear. Now, a second predator stalked the dark, and they did not know if it was friend or foe. Humanity had allies, yes. But allies did not hide in the shadows while fleets crumbled. No, this felt different. This felt like opportunists, waiting for both sides to weaken before striking. The tension doubled. Not only did they need to keep the armada in fear, but now they had to account for a hidden force watching the same prey. The stakes rose higher than anyone had expected. If the second presence revealed itself too soon, humanity's careful trap might collapse. The young technician spoke first, her voice low. "Do we engage them?" The captain shook his head slowly. "Not yet. We don't reveal ourselves to anyone until we must. Let's see if they blink first." His words were steady, but inside he knew the risk had grown. A warship against an armada was a nightmare already. A warship against an armada and a second hunter. This was a different kind of battlefield altogether. The alien commander finally sensed it too. Reports filtered in from the edges of his fleet. Strange readings, not matching human signatures, not matching their own either. He stiffened, realizing with a sinking feeling that his armada was not just prey to one threat, but two. His heart pounded as the truth struck him. They had walked into a trap, not just the humans' trap, but something larger. His officers shouted again, panic surging louder than before. Now their fear was no longer only of humans. Now it was fear of the unknown. The humans listened to the chatter spilling from intercepted channels. The armada was fracturing faster, paranoia eating it alive. One officer on the alien flagship demanded they retreat. Another screamed they should. "Unleash every weapon at once," another muttered about betrayal from within. The commander roared for silence, but he could not stop the storm. His fleet was breaking not from enemy fire, but from fear stacked upon fear. Inside the human ship, the crew felt the shift, too. The captain watched the displays, his mind racing. The second presence could change everything. It could strip away their careful timing, force them into action before they were ready. Or worse, it could strike at them instead of the armada. The crew sensed his unease, but none spoke it aloud. They trusted him to carry the weight, even as the silent question pressed in on every mind. Who was the second hunter? The answer did not come. The mysterious signals stayed hidden, moving with the patience of something experienced, something dangerous. It mirrored their own tactics, revealing nothing, waiting for the moment of maximum weakness. In that reflection, the human captain saw something unsettling. Whoever this was, they understood the game of fear as well as humanity did. The alien armada, meanwhile, began to fracture visibly. Ships peeled away without orders, desperate to escape what felt like encirclement. Others turned weapons toward one another, mistaking ghost readings for betrayal. The commander screamed for order, but his voice cracked under the strain. He knew his fleet was slipping through his fingers, and worse, he knew that every ship that broke away became an easier target for the hidden hunters. The humans stayed silent, observing. The captain's eyes remained locked on the screen. "They'll tear themselves apart before we fire a single shot," he murmured. But even as he said it, he knew the second predator could not be ignored. If the aliens fell too fast, the opportunity for humanity to send its message would be stolen. The galaxy would not see the strength of a human warship. It would only see chaos. And that could not be allowed. In the mess hall, some of the younger crew whispered to each other, fear creeping in. "What if they're here for us?" one asked. "What if we're the prey now?" Another shook his head, forcing the words out. "Then we do what humans always do. We fight anyway." The words steadied them, but the fear lingered. In the engine room, the hum grew louder as systems primed, ready for action. The chief engineer tightened his grip on a railing, muttering to himself. 2 predators in 1 hunt. Let's see who bites first." Back on the alien flagship, the commander made his choice. His voice thundered over the comms, desperate but commanding. "We retreat!" The words shocked his officers, but no one argued. Retreat was a word their people despised, but it was better than being devoured by shadows. Engines roared to life across the fleet, ships breaking formation entirely as they tried to escape. The human captain watched this unfold, his eyes narrowing. If they retreated now, the humans would have no chance to show the galaxy their defiance. Worse, the second presence might use the retreat to strike at both sides. He felt the weight of decision pressing down harder than ever. To reveal themselves now meant danger. To stay hidden meant the opportunity to shape history might vanish forever. The enemy ships began to burn across the void, engines blazing as they tried to flee. The commander shouted orders, desperate to maintain some kind of order in the chaos. But the humans stayed silent, still waiting. The second presence lingered too, unseen but patient, waiting for its chance. And then, for the first time, the hidden hunter made its move. A burst of energy lit up from the far side of the battlefield, not aimed at the human ship, but at the retreating armada. One of the alien cruisers erupted in flame, torn apart in an instant. The commander screamed in shock, his fleet thrown into chaos once more. The humans stared at the display, eyes widening. The second hunter had revealed itself, and it was brutal. It struck without hesitation, without mercy, cutting into the fleeing armada like a blade. The captain stood still, his voice low and grim. "Now we know. We're not the only predators out here." The tension in the human warship grew heavier than ever. Not only did they face an armada on the edge of collapse, but now they faced another hunter just as ruthless, just as precise. The galaxy had turned darker in a single instant, and as the flames of the destroyed cruiser spread across the void, every soldier aboard the human vessel knew one thing for certain: the real battle had only just begun. the first alien cruisers. Explosion painted the darkness with fire, its shattered hull scattering into glowing fragments. For a heartbeat, everyone, human and alien alike, watched in silence. The second predator had finally shown its hand. The alien armada's retreat turned to full panic, engines blazing as ships scrambled in every direction, no longer a fleet but a broken swarm. On the human vessel, every crew member leaned closer to their displays, their eyes wide. The captain's voice cut through the tension, calm but sharp. They've revealed themselves. That means they're confident or careless. Either way, this is our moment. The crew snapped to life, fingers flying over controls, systems roaring awake, weapons hummed with restrained power, engines shifted into readiness. The captain's eyes narrowed on the tactical map, where the second predator moved in the dark. Its energy signature was strange, smaller than the alien cruisers, yet deadly, striking with surgical precision. It wasn't here to fight a war. It was here to feast on the weak. And in the chaos, the human warship knew it had to make its stand. Not just against the armada, but against this unknown hunter. The alien commander's voice rang out over fractured channels, desperate and raw. "Return fire! Destroy it!" But his fleet was too broken. Captains fired blindly, beams streaking into the dark, hitting nothing but debris. The mysterious predator slipped between their shots with ease, cutting down another cruiser with terrifying speed. Its strikes were clean, efficient, without waste. The alien commander slammed his fists on the console, realizing the truth. They were prey to not one, but two hunters. Inside the human ship, the young technician whispered, "If we wait, they'll both tear each other apart." The captain shook his head. "If we wait, the galaxy won't know it was us who stood against them. Humanity needs to be seen. Our strength needs to be remembered." His voice carried across the bridge, pulling every ear tight with resolve. "We strike now, but we don't strike like them. We strike to end this." Engines flared, the stealth veil peeled back, and for the first time, the human warship revealed itself. The alien armada froze. Across thousands of screens, the silhouette of the ship appeared, black against the stars, its edges sharp, its presence undeniable. A whisper of horror spread through the aliens. The legends were true. A single human warship had faced their armada and dared to reveal itself in the heart of their retreat. Then the humans fired. Not wild, not desperate, but precise. Beams lanced across the void, cutting through a heavy cruiser that had strayed too far from the line. Missiles roared like thunder, weaving past shields to strike at the engines of another. In moments, the human ship turned panic into devastation, each strike reminding the aliens that their fear had been justified. But the second predator did not stand idle. It shifted course, sensors locking on to the human warship. For the first time, the crew felt the weight of being hunted themselves. Alarms rang as strange energy pulses streaked past their hull, close enough to rattle the decks. The captain gritted his teeth. "So they've chosen us. Good. Let them see what we are." The battle twisted into a storm. On one side, the alien armada disintegrated, ships colliding, fleeing, or burning under human fire. On the other, the second predator danced closer, striking with sharp bursts of alien energy, testing the human ship's defenses. The crew moved with flawless coordination, countering with bursts of missiles, blinding flares, and evasive rolls that pushed the ship to its limits. Sweat ran down faces, hands gripped consoles, but not one faltered. They were human, and humans had always fought hardest with their backs to the wall. In the medbay, the doctor braced herself as the first wounded were brought in. Burns from overloaded circuits, broken bones from violent maneuvers. She moved with steady hands, refusing to let the chaos touch her calm. In the engine room, sparks flew as systems strained. The engineers worked in unison, voices hoarse as they kept the heart of the ship alive. Every corner of the vessel throbbed with life, with determination. Then came the moment the galaxy would remember. The second predator, sleek and fast, darted within range, preparing a killing strike. Its weapons lit, aimed squarely at the human warship's heart. The alien commander, watching from the wreck of his armada, felt a strange mix of relief and despair. If the humans fell, perhaps his fleet might escape, but if the humans survived, nothing could stop them. On the human bridge, the captain gave the command. Now! The ship's weapons roared as one. Beams of light crossed the void. Missiles screamed from their bays. The engines burned brighter than ever before. The Predator's shot fired at the same moment, energy surging toward the humans. The two strikes met in the dark, colliding in a flare of light that blinded sensors across the field. For a terrible instant, no one knew who had survived. When the light faded, the Predator was drifting, its sleek hull torn open, engines sputtering in silence. The human warship had survived, but not unscarred. Fires burned in sections of its hull, shields were shattered, systems flickered under strain. The crew clung to their posts, battered but alive. A ragged cheer rose across the ship, pride burning through exhaustion. They had faced the Predator and stood victorious. The alien commander watched in horror. His fleet was gone, his ships destroyed or fleeing into the void. And the humans, those stubborn, reckless humans, stood alone at the center of it all, battered but unbroken. He lowered his head, the weight of defeat pressing into him. The legends had been true. Humanity could not be crushed by fear, by numbers, or by predators lurking in the dark. The captain of the human ship stood tall, his voice steady, though his body ached. "Transmit the signal," he ordered. The technician nodded, sending out a broadcast that spread across the sector. It carried a simple message, one every species would hear. Humanity stood its ground. Humanity would not be prey. Humanity was to be feared. Silence fell after the message was sent, the battlefield lit only by drifting wreckage and distant stars. The crew breathed slowly, exhaustion settling in, but pride glowing brighter. They had survived the impossible. Yet just as calm seemed to return, a final twist came. On the far edge of their sensors, faint and almost hidden, another signature stirred. It was not the Predator they had defeated. It was something larger, deeper, like the echo of a fleet that had never left. The captain's eyes hardened as he stared at the new readings. They were not alone. The galaxy was far more dangerous than they had imagined. But for now, they had proven their place in it. And as the stars watched in silence, the battered human warship drifted forward, carrying with it a truth no one could deny. Humanity had become the nightmare of the void. Wreckage drifted through the silence of space, glowing faintly as the last embers of fire burned out. The alien armada was gone, scattered into fragments and survivors fleeing into the dark with engines screaming. The Predator that had revealed itself and nearly destroyed the human warship now floated powerless, its broken hull slowly tumbling, giving off no more threats. The battlefield, once filled with panic and chaos, was now quiet except for the steady hum of the human vessel that had stood against it all. Inside the human warship, the crew sat in a silence of their own. The adrenaline had burned away, leaving exhaustion pressed deep into their bones. Every face was pale, every movement slower, but there was also a glow of something stronger than fatigue, pride. They had survived when no one believed they could. They had proven, not just to the alien fleet, but to the galaxy itself, that humanity was not to be underestimated. The captain remained at his station, his posture firm, though his body longed for rest. He looked at his people, seeing in them the same determination he had carried throughout the mission. These were not perfect soldiers, not flawless machines. They were human, tired, scarred, and uncertain. But their strength lay in that very humanity. They carried fear, but did not Surrender to it. They carried doubt but still pressed forward. That was the lesson the galaxy had to learn, and tonight they had delivered it. The young technician who had first spotted the predator's shadow broke the silence. Her voice was soft but filled with awe. "We did it." The words rippled across the bridge, stirring small smiles and nods among the crew. The captain allowed himself a faint smile as well, though his eyes stayed fixed on the stars beyond. "Yes," he said quietly. "We did, and they'll remember this." The broadcast they had sent was already spreading across the systems. Every ship, every station, every listening post in range would pick it up. The message was simple but powerful. Humans had stood against an armada and a predator, and they were still here. For civilizations who had long dismissed humanity as reckless or weak, this battle was proof otherwise. And for those who had already feared them, this was confirmation of every story whispered in the dark. In the med bay, the doctor leaned back, against a wall, wiping blood from her hands after treating the last of the wounded. Her supplies were nearly gone, but her spirit was steady. She had seen soldiers broken and repaired. She had seen engineers risk everything to keep power flowing. She had seen the crew bend but not break. That resilience was what she admired most. As tired as she was, she knew she would tell this story, again and again, because it mattered. Down in the engine room, the chief engineer slumped against a bulkhead, grease and soot smeared across his face. Systems were damaged, but the ship was alive, still moving, still able to fight if it had to. He let out a long breath, muttering, "Not bad for one ship against a galaxy." His team chuckled weakly, the sound carrying relief more than humor. They had kept the heart of the vessel beating when it mattered most, and they knew their work had made the difference between victory and death. The alien commander, drifting with the remnants of his fleet, stared at the ruins on his screen. His people had not been prepared for what they faced, but now he understood. The humans were not just another species, they were something new, something dangerous. He felt a hollow ache as the truth sank in. His armada, his power, his pride had been broken not by numbers or firepower, but by will. He sent one last transmission before retreating into the void, a message carried to his people. Do not underestimate them. The humans are more dangerous than we believed. Back on the human warship, the crew began slow repairs. Panels were replaced, fires extinguished, damaged systems patched as best as they could. Every task carried weight, because they all knew what they had accomplished. For each scar on the ship's hull, there was a story of survival. For each dent and burn, there was proof of human resolve. As the work continued, the young technician approached the captain. "What about the signal we saw at the end?" she asked. "The one still out there?" Her voice trembled slightly, not from fear but from curiosity. The captain's gaze hardened as he recalled the faint reading, the shadow beyond the predator they had defeated. "It means this was only the beginning," he said softly. "The galaxy is larger, darker, more dangerous than we thought. But it also means we have more to prove, and we will." The crew absorbed his words, feeling both, the weight of them and the spark they carried. Humanity had taken its first step into a wider battlefield, and though it was filled with dangers, it was also filled with opportunities to show who they were. Hours later, as the ship drifted past the wreckage and the stars stretched endless. Before them, the captain finally allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. He thought of Earth, of the colonies, of the people who had no idea what had just been decided in the silence of the void. He thought of the legends that would be told now, how whispers of this battle would spread from one world to another. He knew some would fear them, others would admire them, but none would ignore them. The human warship moved on, carrying scars but also carrying a message carved into the stars. Humanity would not vanish. Humanity would not be silent. They would fight, they would endure, and they would shape the galaxy with their will. As the crew finally rested, the stars outside seemed brighter, sharper, as if even the universe itself acknowledged the truth. The humans had stepped into the fire, and they had not burned. They had risen, and though another shadow lingered at the edge of their sensors, waiting for its time, the crew knew that whatever came next, they would face it together, because that was what it meant to be human. In the quiet hum of the warship, drifting beyond the battlefield, a final truth settled in every heart aboard. Fear could shake them, enemies could outnumber them, predators could stalk them, but nothing could break the human spirit. And somewhere in the galaxy, watching the broadcast of their defiance, new voices whispered in awe and fear alike. Humanity had arrived,